Okay, let's start working on quadratic equation. So when we say quadratic equation, it is the equation in second degree. Okay, your equation will look like that. If your equation is like ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0, where the coefficient of x squared is non-zero, then that is called the quadratic equation. Let me give you an example. If you have something like, say, for example, 5x squared plus 2x minus 3 equal to 0, that is a quadratic equation. In place of A, I have 5. In place of B, you can see I have a 2. In place of C, I have a negative 3 equal to 0. So if the quadratic equation is written in this form, this is the standard form. Okay, this is the standard form. Standard form is there should be equal to 0. That is in the standard form. And remember, this equation is a quadratic equation because of the second power. Look at that. The highest power of x is a 2. If the highest power is 2, then it is called the quadratic equation. Okay, the power of x is 2. So in this case, if the power is 2, there are also 2 solutions. In general, there are 2 solutions or 2 answers to this equation. If we solve this equation, then we are going to get 2 different answers. 2 answers. Okay? So that is other thing you should know. That is a standard form. A, B, and C are there. Because of the highest power 2, this is called the quadratic equation. And by solving this equation, we get 2 solutions. There are several ways to solve this type of equations. We can solve it by factoring. These are some of the common methods. Factoring is one of the methods of solving the quadratic equation. Second method that we use is completing the square. Completing the square. This is very, very important method for your course, completing the square, because this is going to appear over and over again throughout the course. So you need to know this technique. And the third one is using quadratic formula. We can solve quadratic equation using quadratic formula. So there are many, but these are the 3 important methods that we use for solving the quadratic equation. And we are going to look at the example for each of these. Okay, if you have any question there, let me know. If not, we'll move on to example. Okay, let's look at an example involving factoring method. So here I have one example, solve the quadratic equation by factoring. So here is the equation. This is a quadratic equation because you can see that there is the highest power of x as 2. Because the highest power of x is 2, this is a quadratic equation. But this quadratic equation is not in the standard form. Remember, the right-hand side is not 0. So this is not in the standard form. So first we have to make it in the standard form. So let's begin. We have x squared plus 5 over 2x equal to 3 over 2. Now, what you need to do is, see, there is a fraction. There is 2 in the denominator. So just like in the previous class, if you see a fraction, you have to multiply throughout by LCD and remove that fraction. So there is 2 and 2. So the LCD will also be 2. So multiply each term by 2. Multiply the first one by 2. Multiply that second one by 2. And multiply the third one by 2. So you have to multiply throughout by 2 like that. So what I get here is 2x squared, then plus, look at the second one. We have 2 times 5, that's a 10, divided by 2, that's 5x, equal to 2 times 3, that is 6, divided by 2, that is a 3. Or in other words, you can think of this one as here 2 in the numerator, 2 in the denominator, cancel. And same thing here, 2 in the numerator, 2 in the denominator cancel. So we have a 5x here and then a 3 there. Why I'm doing this? Because I want to remove that fraction first. Now, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to write the quadratic equation in standard form. I told you in the previous slide, the standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. I have to write it like that. If I write it as ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0, then we say that it is in the standard form. So I want 0 on the right-hand side. So if I want 0 on the right-hand side, what I need to do is I need to subtract these 3 on both sides. So basically, you move over 3 to the left, it will be negative. So you can write that as 2x squared plus 5x minus 3, subtract 3 on both sides, equal to 0. So now, this is the quadratic equation in standard form. Okay, this is the quadratic equation in standard form. And as I told you earlier, we can solve this quadratic equation by 3 different methods. Okay, we can solve it by 3 different methods. Look here. Those 3 different methods are, you can solve by factoring, you can solve by completing the square, you can solve by using quadratic formula. These are the 3 different methods to solve the quadratic equation. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to solve this quadratic equation using 3 different methods. So you can see these 3 different methods, how we can use 3 different methods to solve quadratic equation. So first one, I'm going to solve it by factoring. I'm going to solve it by factoring. This is standard quadratic equation. 2x squared plus 5x minus 3 equal to 0. So in your intermediate algebra class or in Algebra 2 at high school, you have learned the factoring method. So let's try to recall that, okay? I know math is so easy to forget. Let's see whether we can recall that or not. We want to factor this. So I'm going to lay out the steps so you'll be able to recall those, okay? So this is a second degree trinomial. Second degree because the highest power is 2. It's a quadratic equation. Trinomial because you have 1, 2, 3 terms. It is exactly like ax squared, bx, and c. So how do we solve that? By factoring. What we need to do in factoring is you multiply this coefficient of x squared with that constant. Okay, first thing what you do is you do 2 times negative 3. 2 times negative 3 is how much?
6.
Negative 6.
Negative 6.
Right. Now, from negative 6, what you have to do is you have to find 2 factors of negative 6. That means what 2 numbers multiply together to give you negative 6. And also, when you add those 2 numbers, it should be negative 5.
A negative 3 and a positive 2.
Negative 3 and a positive 2?
Yeah.
Okay, let's think about that. Negative 3 and positive 2, if you multiply, yes, that is a negative 6. But if you add that, is that a positive 5? If you add these two, negative 3 plus 2, is that a positive 5?
No.
No, that means these two number doesn't work. I need something else.
6 and negative 1.
Say that again.
6 and negative 1.
Okay, 6 and negative 1. If I multiply 6 and negative 1, 6 times negative 1 is a negative 6. That's correct. And also 6 minus 1 is a 5, right? 6 minus 1 is a 5.
Yes.
So that means these two numbers are working perfectly fine. That's your first step. One more time, what you do is you find 2 factors. Okay, you find 2 factors that add up to positive 5. Okay, now why we need that? We need these two numbers because In next step, we are not going to write plus 5x. We are going to write it as negative 1x plus 6x. That's why we need that, because we are factoring it. Okay. So 2x squared minus 1x plus 6x minus 3 equal to 0. So now we have 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4. We can factor by grouping. So that is, you can make 2 groups like this to factor. You can see that in this first group, there is a common factor of x. That is, you can divide both of them by x. That's what I mean. I can divide both of them by x. X times 2x, x times 2x is 2x squared. It's the opposite of multiplication. Factoring is the opposite of multiplication. Then minus x times 1. X times 1 is that 1x. So 2x minus 1. And in the second group, look at the second group. That is a plus, so you can write plus 6x minus 3. 6x minus 3. In both of these, there is a common factor of 3. You can divide this by 3. You can divide this by 3. So if I divide by 3, 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 2x is 6x. Minus 3 times 1 is a 3. 3 times 1 is a 3. So that is where we factor. This is the actual factoring step. This is the factoring step. Factoring means opposite of multiplication, opposite of distribution. And if we do the factoring correctly, one thing will happen. One magic will happen. The quantity inside the parenthesis will be exactly same. Look at that. 2x minus 1, 2x minus 1. That is one of the factors. Okay, 2x minus 1 is one of the factors. And what is the other factor? You can see what is outside the parenthesis in the first one. There is x. And you can see what is there outside the parenthesis in the second one, plus 3. That is the second factor. So your first factor is 2x minus 1. Your second factor is x plus 3. Multiply together to get you a 0. Okay, 2x minus 1, x plus 3 equal to 0. So this completes the factoring process. We have not solved it, but we completed the factoring process. So remember, this factoring technique is factoring second degree trinomial. This is called factoring second degree trinomial. If you need to review the concept from your intermediate algebra or algebra 2, or if you want to, maybe sometimes we want to watch YouTube videos for that. So that is what you search, right? Factoring second degree trinomial. This is the technique of factoring the second degree trinomial. And once you factor that, what you're going to get is you are going to get 2x minus 1 equal to 0, or the second one is x plus 3 equal to 0. Because we have two quantities multiplied to 0, meaning of that is either the first one is 0 or the second one is 0. Now, what happened is we have a crazy second degree equation. We break down to simple linear equation, and we can solve this easily to get the two values of x. So how do we solve it? Here, you add 1 on both sides. If you add 1 on both sides, you get 2x equal to 1. 0 plus 1 is 1. Then divide on both sides by 2. So you get x equal to 1/2. That is the first value of x. I told you because the power is 2, you are going to get 2 solutions. We get 1 solution, x equal to 1/2. The second value will be, we get it from here, x plus 3 equal to 0. So what you need to do is subtract 3 on both sides, minus 3, minus 3. If you subtract 3 on both sides, 3 and 3 cancel, x equal to 0 minus 3 is a negative 3. So we get two values. So 1/2 and -3. So this method is called in solving the quadratic equation by factoring. Okay, I'll talk more about solving quadratic equation in our next meeting.